the Epic of Gilgamesh, the full story of the king who fought death. Before history was written by victors, before empires rose and fell like the turning of the tide, before the great pyramids pierced the Egyptian sky, a story was etched into clay. It is a story that has survived the gnawing teeth of millennia. A tale of a king so mighty he challenged the very gods. A man who stared into the abyss of oblivion and dared to spit in its face. This is not merely a story of heroes and monsters, of friendship and betrayal. It is the first great human story. It is the story of our first existential crisis, our first raging against the dying of the light. This is the Epic of Gilgamesh. Welcome, seekers of forgotten lore, to the Eldritch Codex. Today we journey back more than 4,000 years, to the land between the two rivers, Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. We will walk the sun-scorched streets of Uruk, the first great city of humanity, and we will uncover the tale of its legendary king, a man 2/3 god, 1/3 human, who was both a paragon of human virtue and a vessel of its deepest flaws. He was the king who fought death and lost, and in his loss he bequeathed to us a wisdom that echoes through the ages. So prepare yourselves as we unseal the cedar box and read from the tablets of lapis lazuli, the story of the man who saw the deep. In the dim pre-dawn of recorded history, in a land cradled between the life-giving arms of the Tigris and Euphrates, humanity took its first great stride out of the darkness of prehistory and into the light of civilization. This land was Mesopotamia, and its crowning achievement, its first great metropolis, was the city of Uruk. A city of such magnificence, its reputation echoed across the ancient world. It was a city of soaring ziggurats dedicated to the heavens, of bustling markets, of intricate canal systems that turned arid plains into fertile gardens. And at its heart, encircling it all like a great stone serpent, were its walls. Walls so vast, so impossibly strong, they were said to have been laid by the hands of sages, a testament to human will and ingenuity. But every great city has its king, and Uruk was ruled by a figure as colossal and formidable as the walls he commanded. His name was Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was no mere mortal. His very essence was a paradox, a being caught between the divine and the human. He was born of a goddess, the wise and revered Ninsun, and a human father, the priest king Lugalbanda. The gods themselves had a hand in his creation, shaping him to be the pinnacle of mortal form. He was 2/3 god and only 1/3 man. The glorious sun god, Shamash, gifted him with a beauty so radiant it stunned those who looked upon him. Adad, the god of the storm, granted him a courage that knew no equal, a boundless well of valor. His body was a masterpiece of divine artistry. His strength was absolute, surpassing all other kings and heroes on the earth. He was, by all accounts, perfect. But this perfection of form was not matched by a perfection of spirit. In that remaining third of his being, that fragile mortal part, lay the seeds of a profound flaw. For Gilgamesh was a king who had forgotten his duty. His immense power, his divine heritage, did not inspire in him a sense of stewardship or compassion for his people. Instead, it fermented into a toxic brew of arrogance and entitlement. He was a tempest of unchecked energy, a wild bull released into the china shop of his own kingdom. The great walls of Uruk, the very symbol of his city's strength, became a monument to his oppression. The young men of Uruk were his playthings, their strength a resource to be spent for his amusement and his leviathan ego. Day after day, he would summon them for ceaseless brutal games of strength. He would wrestle them, race them, fight them, driving them until they collapsed in the dust, their spirits as ground down as their bodies. He left no son to his father, tearing them away from their homes to serve his whims, to labor on his grand projects. Their youth spent not in learning a trade or starting a family, but in feeding the insatiable furnace of their king's ambition. His restless energy was a plague upon the city. There was no peace, no respite. The clang of hammers on brick was constant, the groans of laborers a ceaseless chorus. He ruled with an iron fist, believing that he, by divine right, was the sole owner of Uruk and everything within it, including its people. And then there was the most chilling of his abuses, a violation that struck at the heart of every family in Uruk. Gilgamesh decreed for himself the droit du seigneur, the Lord's right. By his law, he claimed the right to be the first man with any new bride. On the night of her wedding, before she could be with her husband, she was to be his. A shadow fell over every celebration of love, tainting the most sacred of unions with the bitter taste of fear and humiliation. The joy of the wedding feast became a prelude to the sorrow of the wedding chamber, where a bride's tears mingled with the bitter tears of her powerless new husband. The city, his city, began to suffocate under the weight of his tyranny. The people, his people, had had enough. A quiet lament began to rise from the streets and courtyards of Uruk. It rose from the exhausted parents who had lost their sons to the king's whims. It rose from the dishonored husbands and the weeping brides. The collective grief of the city swelled into a single desperate cry that pierced the clouds and traveled to the very ears of the gods in their celestial court. He is supposed to be the shepherd of his people, they cried out to Anu, the great father of the sky. But he has become a wolf that devours his own flock. His arrogance has no equal. He storms through the city, a wild bull with his head held high. Is there no one to stand against him? Their plea was not for the king's destruction, but for balance. O great Aruru, you who created him, they prayed. Now create his double. Create his equal, a man with the heart as stormy as his, a man of equal strength. Let them contend with each other. Let their titanic struggle shake the very foundations of Uruk, so that in their rivalry, the city might finally know peace. The gods heard. They saw the suffering, and they acknowledged the truth in the people's plea. Gilgamesh, their magnificent creation, had become unbalanced, a force of nature without a countervailing force. Anu turned to Aruru, the goddess of creation, she who had fashioned the first humans from the clay of the earth. Aruru understood what must be done. She descended from the heavens, not to the bustling city, but to the vast untamed wilderness. She washed her hands, took a pinch of clay and spat upon it, and with the same divine skill she had used to shape all of mankind, she molded a new being in the image of the sky god Anu himself. She did not create another king. She created his opposite. She cast him not into the city, but into the wilderness. He was a child of nature, as raw and untamed as the steppe he called home. His body was matted with hair, a wild mantle covering his skin. His locks grew long and coarse like the mane of a lion, like the grain of the fields. He possessed the strength of a wild beast because he was one of them. He ate grass in the hills alongside the gazelles, and he knew nothing of cultivated land, of woven cloth, of the bitter taste of ale or the sharp sting of ambition. He was the innocence of the wild world, a walking embodiment of all that Gilgamesh was not. The gods gave him a name. He was Enkidu. He was the answer to a city's prayer. He was the wild card of destiny. He was the force of nature sent to tame a force of man, and his arrival would change the world forever. While Gilgamesh reigned as a tempest within the walls of Uruk, the gods' answer to his tyranny was taking form in the heart of the wilderness. Here, far from the clamor of civilization, lived Enkidu. He was the land's own pulse, a being of pure, unadulterated nature. He did not know the concept of a house or a city. The sky was his roof, the earth his bed. He ate grass in the hills as if it were his birthright and drank from the same watering holes as the wild herds. He was their brother, their protector. His strength, a mirror to Gilgamesh's own, was not used for conquest or oppression, but for harmony. He moved with the beasts, understood their silent language, and saw the world through their innocent eyes. He was a part of the great, ancient cycle of life, untouched by human ambition or sorrow. But the gears of destiny had begun to turn, and the world of men was about to encroach upon his wild paradise. The agent of this change was an unwitting man, a trapper, whose livelihood depended on the bounty of the steppe. For days his work had been undone. His pits, dug with sweat and effort to catch game, were filled in. His snares were broken. Their intended victims vanished. The trapper was perplexed, then enraged, and finally afraid. He decided to lie in wait, to discover what manner of beast or spirit was sabotaging his hunt. For 3 days he watched from a distance, and on the third day he saw him. Emerging from the hills with a herd of gazelles was a figure that defied his understanding. It was a man, yet not a man. He was a giant, covered in hair, with the strength of a legion. The trapper watched in stunned silence as Enkidu methodically freed a trapped animal and then, with his bare hands, filled in the pit. A primordial terror seized the trapper. This was no mere animal. This was something else entirely. Fleeing in terror, the trapper returned to his father and recounted the tale of the wild man who ruled the steppe. His father, a man wise in the ways of the world, listened intently. He knew that brute force could never overcome such a being. A different kind of power was needed, a power as old as civilization itself. "Go, my son, to Uruk," the old man counseled. "Seek out Gilgamesh the king. His strength is legendary. He will know what to do. Describe this wild man to him, and ask him for a gift, a weapon more potent than any axe or spear. Ask him for Shamhat, a temple courtesan. For the allure of a woman is a fearsome and transformative thing. Where the wild man drinks with his herd, let her reveal her charms. When he lies with her, he will be transformed. The beasts of the field, his family, will see him as other, and they will abandon him." Following his father's advice, the trapper made the long journey to the great city of Uruk. Before the mighty Gilgamesh, he prostrated himself and told his story of the savage giant in the wilderness. As Gilgamesh listened, a flicker of something other than anger crossed the king's face. Curiosity. A man whose strength rivaled his own? A being who commanded the loyalty of wild beasts? This was no mere nuisance. This was a phenomenon. Intrigued by the prospect of a true equal, Gilgamesh agreed to the plan. He summoned Shamhat, the Shamadim, whose role was not one of shame, but a sacred duty within the temple of Ishtar. In the Mesopotamian worldview, her sexuality was a divine gift, a sacred conduit to bring the wild into the fold of the civilized. For 3 days, the trapper and Shamhat waited by the watering hole. On the third day, as the sun began to bleed across the horizon, Enkidu arrived with his animal companions. Seeing him, Shamhat did as she was instructed. She did not approach with aggression or fear, but with a quiet confidence in her art. She revealed her beauty, not merely as an act of seduction, but as an offering, an invitation to a world of touch, of knowledge, of humanity, that Enkidu had never known. Enkidu, who had known only the company of beasts, was captivated. He was drawn to her. This creature so different from himself. For 6 days and 7 nights, they were together, and in that sacred transaction, a profound transmutation occurred. Shamhat taught him not just of physical intimacy, but of the human world. And Enkidu, in turn, began to forget the wilderness that had birthed him. When the 7th night had passed, Enkidu rose, his mind sated with a new kind of knowledge. He sought out his friends, the gazelles and the beasts of the steppe, but as he approached them, they no longer recognized his scent. They caught the scent of civilization upon him, the scent of humanity, and they fled. He tried to run after them to reclaim his place in the herd, but his knees, once tireless, now failed him. He was physically diminished, yet his mind, his consciousness had expanded. He had lost his animal purity, but he had gained wisdom. He had been civilized. He returned, weakened and confused, to Shamhat. She saw the new awareness in his eyes and began his education in earnest. She divided her own clothing and gave him half, teaching him the dignity of being clothed. She brought forth bread, a food he had never seen, and he ate it. She offered him ale, and he drank it, 7 goblets, until his heart was light and his face glowed. He was becoming a man. And as he learned the ways of men, Shamhat told him of Uruk, the magnificent city, the center of the world. She told him of its feasts, its music, its people. And she told him of its mighty king, Gilgamesh. She spoke of his beauty and his unparalleled strength. But then she told him of the king's dark side. His arrogance, his oppression, and the cruel tradition of taking every bride for himself on her wedding night. As Enkidu listened, something stirred within him. He who had lived by the simple, pure laws of nature was appalled by this profound injustice. A fire born of a pure and righteous indignation ignited in Enkidu's soul. This king, this Gilgamesh, was a perversion of strength, a shepherd who preyed upon his flock. A sense of purpose, clear and sharp, formed in his newly awakened mind. "I will go to Uruk," Enkidu declared, his voice deep and resolute. "I will walk its streets, and I will challenge him. I will cry out in the heart of the city for all to hear. I am the one who is strongest. I will confront this tyrant, and I will change the order of things." The wild man had found his cause. The stage was now set for the clash of titans that would shake Uruk to its very foundations. The wild man was a wild man no more. Enkidu, guided by the words of Shamhat and driven by a newfound purpose, strode into the city of Uruk. He was a sight to behold, a being of the steppe walking upon baked brick. The people of the city, accustomed to the singular, unmatchable might of their king, gathered in the streets to marvel at this newcomer. They saw his powerful frame, his muscles honed by a life of primal struggle. They whispered amongst themselves, their voices filled with a burgeoning excitement. "He is like Gilgamesh in stature," one would say. "But shorter," another would add. "Yet he is more formidable in bone and sinew." They saw in his eyes not the arrogant fire of a tyrant, but the steady, resolute gaze of the wilderness itself. In this stranger, this powerful enigma, the oppressed people of Uruk saw a flicker of hope. They saw a challenger. They saw an answer to their prayers. Meanwhile, within the palace walls, Gilgamesh himself was troubled. For several nights, his sleep had been visited by potent omens. He dreamt of a meteorite, a star from the heavens, that fell to earth before him. It was so heavy that he, the strongest of all men, could not lift it. He dreamt of a mighty axe strangely wrought, that appeared in the streets of Uruk. He was drawn to it, he loved it like a wife, but he could not move it. Puzzled and disturbed, he sought the counsel of his wise mother, Nin-sun, the great interpreter of dreams. She listened patiently and then smiled with the divine understanding. "My son," she said, her voice calming his restless heart, "these are not omens of doom but of destiny. The star that fell from heaven, the axe you could not lift, this is your comrade. A mighty companion is coming to you, a man of immense strength, a savior. He is the one who will stand by your side. You will love him as a wife, you will embrace him, and he will be your equal, your other self." Gilgamesh was pacified, but did not yet understand. He did not know that his fated brother was already walking the streets of his city, preparing for a confrontation. The moment of destiny arrived, as it so often does, at a nexus of joy and sorrow. A wedding was taking place in Uruk. The sounds of music and celebration filled the air, but beneath it all lay the cold dread of the king's decree. The ceremonial bed was prepared, the bride adorned, and the groom stood by her side, his face a mask of feigned happiness hiding a core of despair. And then, as expected, the king appeared. Gilgamesh, in all his terrible beauty and power, began his walk toward the chamber to claim his cruel privilege. But this time his path was blocked. Standing in the doorway, his feet planted like the roots of an ancient tree, was Enkidu. A hush fell over the street. The music died. The people held their breath. For the first time, the king's will was met with an immovable object. The two men, the god-king of civilization and the wild champion of nature, stood face to face. Their eyes met across the threshold, and in that silent gaze, a challenge was issued and accepted. This was more than a fight for a bride. It was a battle for the soul of Uruk. Gilgamesh, his face contorted in a mask of fury at this public defiance, let out a roar and charged. Enkidu met him head-on. The two titans met in a clash that would be etched into the memory of Uruk forever. They grappled in the public square, a whirlwind of divine fury and primal strength. They snorted and bellowed like two great bulls, their feet pounding the earth, their bodies straining against each other. The force of their struggle was catastrophic. The walls of the nearby houses trembled as if from an earthquake. The great doorposts of the wedding chamber, built to last for generations, shattered into splinters under their immense power. The city itself seemed to groan under the weight of their combat. For what felt like an eternity, neither could gain an advantage. They were perfectly matched, the raw, untamed power of Enkidu against the skilled, divinely honed strength of Gilgamesh. The people of Uruk watched, mesmerized and terrified, as the two strongest beings on earth fought for supremacy. Finally, with a tremendous effort that called upon every ounce of his divine heritage, Gilgamesh, the master wrestler, found his opening. He broke Enkidu's hold, lifted him, and with a final desperate surge, he bent Enkidu's knee to the ground. The wild man was defeated. Gilgamesh stood victorious. But as the king stood over his vanquished foe, the fire of his rage began to cool. The fury of the battles subsided, and in the sudden quiet, something shifted within him. He looked down at Enkidu, and he did not see an enemy. He saw a mirror. He saw the strength, the passion, the untamed heart that he recognized in himself. For the first time in his life, he had met a force that could match his own, and in doing so he no longer felt alone. The loneliness of ultimate power had vanished. His anger melted like snow in the spring sun. The fight was over, and the prophecy of his mother resonated in his mind. This was the axe. This was the star. He extended his hand not to strike a final blow, but to help his rival to his feet. Enkidu accepted the hand, and as he rose, the rivalry died. The animosity was washed away in a flood of mutual respect. They looked at each other, no longer as adversaries, but as brothers who had found each other through the crucible of combat. And then they embraced. The two halves of a whole were finally united. The people of Uruk erupted in cheers, for they knew they were witnessing not just the end of a fight, but the end of an era of tyranny. Their king's destructive energy, once a plague upon them all, now had a companion, a channel, a steadying hand. The wild bull had been calmed, not by being broken, but by finding a fellow bull to run beside. Gilgamesh had found his equal, his friend, his brother. The city was at peace, and the greatest adventure of their lives was about to begin. In the wake of their momentous clash and newfound brotherhood, a strange and unfamiliar quiet settled over Uruk. The king's oppressive energy, now channeled into friendship, no longer plagued his people. The city flourished. But peace, for a soul forged in divine fire like Gilgamesh, can feel like stagnation. The quiet days, the comfortable routines, they began to weigh on him. He felt his legendary strength, the power that could shake mountains, being sapped by idleness. His heart, accustomed to turmoil and triumph, yearned for a new horizon, a new challenge worthy of his name. One day he turned to Enkidu, his eyes burning with a familiar fire. But this was not the fire of tyranny. It was the fire of colossal ambition, the hunger for a legacy that would outlast stone. "My friend, my brother," he began, his voice resonating with purpose. "An ignoble end awaits us all if we sit here in the city. Men die, and their names are forgotten like whispers in the wind. My heart is heavy, for my name is not yet set up for all time. I have not yet achieved a deed that will be sung by generations to come. Therefore, I will journey to the west, to the land of the living, and I will enter the great cedar forest. Enkidu's expression changed. A shadow of a memory, a primal fear from his wild days crossed his face. He knew of this place. The forest is vast and forbidden to mortals, Gilgamesh continued, his voice rising. And deep within it dwells a terror, a guardian placed there by the gods. His name is Humbaba. I will find him. I will slay this evil, and I will cut down the tallest, most sacred cedar as an offering to the gods and a monument to our strength. I will purge the land of this great evil, and the world will hear of the glory of Gilgamesh. My name will be remembered for all eternity. Enkidu was horrified. Tears welled in his eyes as he recounted what he knew. I know this place, my friend. In my youth, when I roamed the wilderness, I ventured to the edge of that forest. It is 10,000 leagues wide and 10,000 leagues long. The guardian Humbaba, his roar is the sound of the flood. His mouth is fire itself, and his very breath is death. He can hear a rustling in the leaves from 60 leagues away. He was placed there by the great and terrible god Enlil to protect the sacred cedars. Who are we to invade his domain? It is a battle we cannot win. It is a journey from which we will not return. But Gilgamesh laughed, his ambition deaf to the voice of reason and fear. He chided his friend, his words sharp. Why, my friend, do you speak like a coward? Have you grown soft in the city? All that you have seen has made you fearful. As for me, my mind is set. Even if I fall, I will have made a name for myself. They will say, Gilgamesh fell in glorious battle against the ferocious Humbaba. You are to stay by my side. With two, our chances are doubled. Enkidu, torn between his terror of the forest and his loyalty to his brother, finally relented. His fate was now bound to the king's ambition. The two heroes went before the elders of Uruk to announce their quest. The wise old men listened, their faces etched with concern. They echoed Enkidu's warnings. You are young, Gilgamesh, the eldest said. Your heart has carried you away. Do not trust in your own strength alone. This is a journey fraught with peril. But they saw the unshakable resolve in their king's eyes. Knowing they could not stop him, they gave their reluctant blessing, and they entrusted the king's life into Enkidu's hands. Let Enkidu go before you, they urged. He knows the path, he has seen the way. Let him protect the king, his friend, and bring him back safely to us. Before their departure, Gilgamesh sought one final blessing. He went to the temple with Enkidu to see his mother, the goddess Nin's son. She dressed in her finest robes, ascended to the temple roof, and burned sacred incense, her prayers rising with the smoke to the heavens. O great Shamash, god of the sun and of justice, she cried. Why did you give my son such a restless heart? Now you have prompted him to go on a long journey to the place of Humbaba, to face a battle he knows not of. Watch over him. Protect him each day until he returns. Then in a final moving act she formally adopted Enkidu, placing a sacred token around his neck, making him a true brother to her son, bound by divine law as well as by love. Armed with axes that required a team of men just to carry, and swords of immense weight and size, the two heroes set off. The journey was immense, a trek that would take a normal expedition 6 weeks they covered in just 6 days. Each night as they made camp, terror seized Gilgamesh in his sleep. He dreamt of a mountain collapsing upon them. He dreamt of being grappled by a fearsome wild bull that split the earth with its bellow. He dreamt of a sky that turned to black, of lightning and fire raining down upon them. He would awake in a cold sweat, his courage faltering. But each time Enkidu was there. He would listen to the terrible vision and with a steadfast loyalty, would interpret the dream not as an omen of doom, but as a promise of victory. The collapsing mountain, he would say, was Humbaba, who they would topple. The fearsome bull was the sun god Shamash, promising his aid. Through the darkness of Gilgamesh's fear, Enkidu was his constant light, his unwavering source of strength. Finally, they stood before it, the great cedar forest. A profound silence hung in the air, broken only by the cry of strange birds. The sheer scale and dark majesty of the place filled them with a deep and chilling awe. Before them was a magnificent gate. This was the entrance to Humbaba's domain. For a moment they hesitated, their quest's reality now a looming terrifying presence. But they looked at each other, drew strength from their bond, and together, they pushed the gate open and stepped into the forbidden realm. They followed the trail left by the monster, a path of crushed trees and scorched earth, deeper into the forest. At last, from a high peak, they saw his lair. Humbaba the guardian emerged. He was a creature of nightmare, his face a grotesque mask of lion-like features, his scales of iridescent bronze. He was cloaked in 7 layers of terrifying aura, garments of pure dread that could paralyze any mortal who looked upon them. The battle that followed was a clash of titans, a storm of fury that shook the forest to its roots. Humbaba was a force of nature, but Gilgamesh and Enkidu, fighting as one, were a force of will. Yet, the monster's power was immense, his terrifying auras weakening their resolve. Seeing his chosen hero faltering, the sun god Shamash intervened from the heavens. He unleashed 13 great winds, the north wind, the south wind, the whirlwind, the storm wind, which blasted Humbaba from all sides, blinding him, immobilizing him, and trapping him in an inescapable vortex. The monster was defeated. Gilgamesh pinned the demon to the ground, his axe at Humbaba's throat. The fearsome guardian, now powerless, began to weep. "Let me go, Gilgamesh," he pleaded. "I will be your servant. I will cut the sacred cedars for you and build you a palace. I will be your slave for all time. Spare me." Gilgamesh, ever impulsive, felt a pang of pity. His rage was spent, and he was moved by the creature's plea. He turned to Enkidu and said, "Shall we not spare him? A captured servant can be of use." But Enkidu, his face grim and his heart unswayed by sentiment, cried out in warning, "Do not listen, my friend. The greatest of beasts cannot be trusted. If we let him go, he will surely turn on us. He will block the path back to Uruk, and we will be trapped here forever. Strike now. Kill him before it is too late. Secure your glory forever." Gilgamesh listened to his friend's pragmatic counsel. He saw the wisdom in Enkidu's words. The moment of pity passed. With a final resolute cry, he brought his great axe down, striking the monster's neck. Enkidu followed with a second blow. The great demon Humbaba, the terror of the cedar forest, was slain. They had done the impossible. They had purged the land of a great evil and stood victorious. True to their word, they cut down the sacred cedars. From the tallest, most magnificent tree, they fashioned a colossal gate, a monument to their victory, to be dedicated in the temple of the gods in Uruk. They built a raft from the remaining timber and, letting the currents of the Euphrates carry them, they floated home in triumph, the head of the slain monster as their gruesome trophy. They had sought glory, and they had seized it with both hands. But they had trespassed in a sacred realm and killed a servant of the gods. And such a victory would not go unanswered. The news of their victory traveled faster than the river's current. When Gilgamesh and Enkidu arrived back at the keys of Uruk, they were met with a rapturous welcome. The entire city hailed them as heroes, as saviors who had rid the world of a primordial terror. They had left as ambitious adventurers and returned as living legends. The great cedar gate they had fashioned was erected at the temple of the god Enlil, a permanent monument to their incredible deed. After the dust of the celebration settled, Gilgamesh sought the comforts of his palace. He shed the grime and blood of his long journey, bathing in the cool waters. He anointed his body with fragrant oils and combed his long, magnificent hair, tying it back in the royal fashion. He cast off his travel-stained skins and donned his pristine white kingly robes, placing the glittering crown of Uruk upon his head. Restored and resplendent, Gilgamesh was a vision of majesty. The glory of his victory had amplified his divine beauty, making him shine with a brilliance that was more God than man. And from her celestial abode, he caught the eye of the most powerful and passionate of all goddesses, Ishtar, the goddess of love, of desire, but also of war and vengeance. She was a deity of terrifying extremes, and as she gazed down upon the magnificent king of Uruk, her heart was inflamed with an overwhelming lust. She descended from the heavens, her divine presence shimmering in the air, and appeared before Gilgamesh. Her voice was like honey, her words a promise of unparalleled delights. "Come, Gilgamesh," she purred, her eyes devouring him. "Be my husband and I will be your wife. Grant me the fruit of your body, let me have you as my own. In return, I shall bestow upon you riches beyond your wildest imaginings. I will have a chariot of lapis lazuli and gold harness for you, with wheels of pure gold and horns of amber. You will be drawn not by mules, but by great storm demons. Kings, princes, and lords will bow down to you, kissing your feet and bringing you the tribute of the mountains and the plains. Your goats will bear triplets, your ewes will bear twins, and your life will be one of unending abundance." It was an offer that no mortal could dream of refusing, a chance to become the consort of a goddess, to gain wealth and power beyond measure. But Gilgamesh, flush with the victory he had earned with his own hands, his pride now as vast as the cedar forest he had conquered, was not impressed. He looked upon the goddess of love, and he saw not a partner but a predator. "And what would I have to give you in return for being your husband?" Gilgamesh countered, his voice sharp with disdain. "You are but a drafty door that lets in the wind, a palace that crushes its own heroes, a shoe that bites its owner's foot. You are a faulty waterskin that soaks its bearer. Which of your lovers have you loved forever? Which of your shepherds has pleased you for all time?" Gilgamesh then proceeded, with a brutal and unforgivable honesty, to list the terrible fates of her former lovers. He spoke of Tammuz, the shepherd of her youth, for whom she decreed weeping year after year. He spoke of the beautifully colored roller bird, whose wing she broke. He spoke of the lion, perfect in strength, for whom she dug 7 pits. He spoke of the magnificent stallion, whom she condemned to the whip and spur. And he spoke of the gardener of her father's palace, who she turned into a mole, forever trapped beneath the earth. "And if I were to love you," he concluded with a final devastating insult, "would you not treat me just as you have treated them?" Silence. No mortal had ever spoken to a god in such a way. Ishtar was utterly humiliated, her divine pride shattered. Her face, once a mask of desire, became a terrifying visage of incandescent rage. With a shriek that echoed through the heavens, she ascended to the highest court, storming before her father Anu, the great god of the sky, and her mother Untu. "Father!" she screamed, tears of fury streaming down her face. "Gilgamesh has insulted me. He has heaped upon me the most vile slanders, recounting all of my abominable deeds to my face. He has rejected me. For this he must be punished. I demand you give me the bull of heaven to unleash upon Uruk. Let it destroy Gilgamesh and his city." Anu, ever the voice of reason, was hesitant. "But was it not you who provoked him? Did he not simply speak the truth of your deeds?" But Ishtar was beyond reason. Her rage was absolute. "If you do not give me the bull of heaven," she threatened, her voice dropping to a terrifying hiss, "I will smash down the gates of the underworld. I will shatter the doorposts and leave the gates wide open. I will raise up the dead, and they will wander the earth to eat the living, until the dead outnumber all of humankind." Faced with this horrific threat, the ultimate cosmic chaos, Anu had no choice. He relented. He unleashed the bull of heaven. The colossal beast descended upon the earth. It was no earthly creature, but a divine instrument of vengeance. With its first snort, it opened a great chasm in the ground, and 100 young men of Uruk fell in and were killed. With its second snort, another chasm opened, and 200 more men perished. The bull brought with it a 7-year famine, its mere presence withering the crops and drying the marshes. It was destruction incarnate, come to punish the hubris of one man. But Uruk no longer had just one hero. It had two. Gilgamesh and Enkidu saw the devastation and stood together once more. They faced the divine beast, a challenge even greater than Humbaba. The battle was immense. Enkidu, with his wild instincts, circled the beast, grabbing it by the tail and horns, wrestling it into position. Gilgamesh, with the precision of a master warrior, waited for the perfect moment. As Enkidu held the mighty bull fast, Gilgamesh plunged his great sword deep into its neck, just behind the horns, striking the fatal blow. They had done the unthinkable. They had killed a demon guardian, and now they had slain a divine beast sent by the gods themselves. Their victory was absolute. But Enkidu, still enraged by the goddess's attack, was not finished. In a final, ultimate act of defiance, he ripped off the bull's right thigh and hurled it into the face of the watching, weeping Ishtar. "If I could lay my hands on you," he shouted up at her, "this is what I would do to you too." They had won. They had celebrated. But they had committed the ultimate sin. They had humiliated a goddess and destroyed her divine instrument of vengeance. Their hubris had reached the heavens. And in the silent court of the great gods, a terrible judgment was about to be passed. Price would be paid, and it would be paid in blood. The exultation in Uruk was immense. The heroes had faced down a goddess and slain her divine instrument of vengeance. They had washed the gore of the bull of heaven from their hands in the Euphrates and had dedicated its massive horns, filled with precious oils, to the glory of Gilgamesh's patron god. They had triumphed. But their defiant victory, their shouted insults at the heavens, had been an act of supreme hubris. And as the city celebrated, the great gods convened in their celestial court to pass judgment. That night, the sentence was delivered to Enkidu in a dream. He awoke in a cold sweat, his heart hammering against his ribs, and sought out his friend. My brother, he cried, his voice trembling. Listen to the dream I had last night. The great gods were in council. Anu our father spoke first. He said, because they have slain the bull of heaven, and because they have killed Humbaba, the guardian of the cedar forest, one of the two must die. Enkidu's voice cracked as he recounted the terrible celestial debate. The mighty Enlil, his anger still smoldering over the violation of his sacred forest and the death of his servant Humbaba, was adamant. Enkidu must die, Enlil declared. Gilgamesh shall not die. The noble sun god Shamash, who had aided the heroes, spoke in their defense. Was it not by my command that they killed the bull of heaven and Humbaba? Must innocent Enkidu die? But Enlil turned on Shamash in fury, accusing him of consorting with mortals. The verdict was set in stone. The price for their hubris had been decided. The bill would fall not upon the 2/3 divine king, but upon the man from the wilderness. As the dream foretold, so it came to pass. A divine malady, a wasting sickness against which there was no remedy, seized Enkidu. As he lay on his sickbed, his strength draining away, his heart filled with a profound bitterness, he looked back on the path that had led him from the freedom of the wilderness to this deathbed in a walled city, and he began to curse. He cursed the great cedar gate he had so proudly fashioned, for the quest it represented had sealed his doom. He cursed the trapper who had first laid eyes on him, pulling him from his life of peaceful ignorance. And with a particular venom, he cursed Shamhat, the temple prostitute who had civilized him. May you never have a roof over your head, he cried in his delirium. May your home be the dusty crossroads. May the drunkard and the thirsty slap your cheek. He cursed her for teaching him the ways of men, for leading him to the friendship that had ultimately led him to this agonizing end. But from the heavens, A voice of reason and compassion answered him. It was Shamash, the sun god, who had seen his plight. "Enkidu, why do you curse the harlot Shamhat?" the god asked gently. "Was it not she who gave you bread fit for a god to eat? Did she not give you ale fit for a king to drink? Did she not clothe you in a magnificent robe? And did she not give you the glorious Gilgamesh for a companion? He is your beloved brother friend. He will have the people of Uruk mourn and lament for you. He will lay you down in a costly resting place, and after you are gone, he himself will wander the wild, his body covered in the skin of a lion." Enkidu listened, and his raging heart grew calm. The god's words were true. His journey into the world of men had brought him pain and death, but it had also brought him the greatest joy of his life, the profound, unbreakable bond of friendship with Gilgamesh. His bitterness subsided, and with a quiet heart, he retracted his curse against Shamhat, blessing her instead. But there was no retracting the judgment of the gods. For 12 long days the illness consumed Enkidu. Gilgamesh never left his side, weeping, pleading, refusing to accept that his other self, his strength, his brother, could be taken from him. In his final hours, Enkidu's mind traveled to the place he was going, and he described to his horrified friend a last terrible vision of the underworld. "I saw the house of dust," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "The place where no one who enters ever returns. I saw the land of no return, where the dead sit in perpetual twilight, their sustenance dust, their food clay. They are clothed like birds with a garment of feathers, and they see no light, living in utter darkness. And there on a throne sat the fearsome queen of the underworld, Ereshkigal." He turned his fading gaze to the king. "My friend," he whispered, his final words a chilling prophecy, "the one who is seized by death cannot return." And with that his suffering ended. The wild man from the steppe, the hero of Uruk, the beloved friend of the king, was gone. A profound, terrible stillness filled the room. Gilgamesh sat frozen as if turned to stone. For 7 days and 7 nights he did not move, he did not speak. He would not allow the body to be buried, clinging to a desperate, mad hope that his friend might hear his cries and rise again. He touched Enkidu's chest, but his heart did not beat. He watched as the body grew cold, and the finality of death settled upon him like a shroud. Then a sound erupted from the king, a roar of anguish like that of a lioness whose cubs have been stolen. He tore at his magnificent hair, ripped his fine royal robes to shreds, and cast off his jewelry as if it were poison. The god-king was gone. In his place was a man drowning in a grief so vast it threatened to swallow the world. He commissioned a magnificent statue of his friend, of gold and lapis lazuli, and held a state funeral where all of Uruk mourned with him. But these were empty gestures. They could not fill the gaping void in his soul. In the cold, still face of Enkidu, Gilgamesh saw for the first time a terrifying reflection of his own fate. He, the mighty king, the slayer of demons and divine beasts, he too would one day lie cold and still, his body turning to dust. The gaping wound of his loss festered, transforming his grief into a new and terrible emotion. Fear. A primal existential terror of his own mortality. "My friend whom I loved so dearly has become like clay," he wailed to the empty air. "Shall I not die too? Must I lie down like him, never to rise again?" The quest for glory was over. A new, more desperate quest had just begun. Casting off his kingly life, Gilgamesh donned the rough skin of an animal and set off alone into the wilderness, a wild man once more, not in search of fame, but in a frantic, desperate flight from death itself. Grief is a wilderness unto itself. And so Gilgamesh, the king of the most civilized city on earth, returned to the wild. Not the ordered wilderness of Enkidu's youth, but a desolate wasteland that mirrored the landscape of his own soul. He wandered aimlessly, his feet raw, his body racked with sorrow. The fear of death had become a tangible presence, a shadow that clung to him, whispering of the dust and the darkness that had claimed his brother. He was a king no more, but a fugitive, fleeing the one enemy no mortal had ever escaped. His journey was driven by a single desperate hope. A legend, a whisper of a man who had cheated fate. His own ancestor Utnapishtim and his wife, who dwelt at the ends of the earth, having survived the great flood and been granted eternal life by the gods. To find him was to find the answer. It was his only hope. As he traveled, he came to a mountain pass by night and saw a pride of lions. The old Gilgamesh would have reveled in such a challenge, a test of glorious strength. But this was different. This was not a battle for glory, but an eruption of pure grief-fueled rage. He fell upon them like a storm, his axe a whirlwind of death. He scattered them, he killed them, his sorrow finding a brief, bloody release. It was a grim reminder that his strength remained, but it was now useless against the silent, creeping enemy he truly feared. His path led him at last to the very edge of the mortal world, to the great twin-peaked mountain of Mashu, the place where the sun rises from the underworld in the morning and re-enters it at night, the gateway between worlds. Guarding the gate of the sun were two beings of unimaginable terror, a scorpion man and his wife. Their heads touched the sky, their very gaze was death, and the aura of dread that surrounded them could shatter the courage of any mortal. When they saw Gilgamesh approaching, gaunt and wild, they recognized him. They saw the flesh of the gods in his form, but they also saw the profound human sorrow etched upon his face. "Who are you who has traveled so far, to the very gates of the sun?" the scorpion man asked, his voice like grinding rock. Gilgamesh did not flinch. He told them his name and his story. He spoke of Enkidu, the friend who was dearer to him than life. He spoke of his death, and the terrible fear that now drove him to seek Utnapishtim the far away. The scorpion man was moved. He saw that the king's grief was genuine, his quest born of a pain that even a monster could understand. "The path you seek is impossible," the guardian warned him. "No mortal has ever passed through the gate of the mountain. Beyond it lies a tunnel of 12 leagues of absolute, crushing darkness. There is no light. The journey is one of utter despair." But seeing the iron resolve in Gilgamesh's eyes, a resolve forged in love and terror, the scorpion man stood aside. "Go, Gilgamesh," he said. "May the mountain pass show you favor." Gilgamesh plunged into the blackness. It was a darkness unlike any night, a physical, suffocating presence that pressed in on him from all sides. He could not see his own hands. He ran blind and alone through the bowels of the earth. For 1 league, 2 leagues, 3 leagues, the darkness was complete. He screamed in terror, his own voice swallowed by the oppressive silence. He ran on, propelled by the image of his dead friend and the terror of sharing his fate. After 9 leagues, he felt a breath of wind on his face. At 10 leagues, the dawn was near. And at the end of the 12th league, just as his strength was failing, he burst forth from the suffocating blackness and into brilliant, dazzling light. He had emerged into a world of impossible beauty, the garden of the gods. Here on the shores of the cosmic sea, the trees dripped with jewels. The fruit was carnelian, the leaves were lapis lazuli, and the ground glittered with precious stones. It was a paradise at the edge of the world. And there by the shore, keeping a tavern for the gods, sat a veiled woman. She was Siduri, the divine alewife. Seeing the wild, haggard man dressed in animal skins approaching her, she was startled. Mistaking him for a murderer or a madman, she barred her gate. But Gilgamesh cried out, pounding on the door, pleading with her to listen. "I am Gilgamesh," he shouted. "He who killed the guardian Humbaba. He who wrestled the bull of heaven. Why do you lock your door against me?" He told her his entire story, his voice breaking as he spoke of Enkidu. Siduri listened patiently, and when he was done, she looked at him with a profound, divine pity, and offered him the truest wisdom of his entire quest. "Gilgamesh, where are you hurrying to? she asked softly. You will never find that life for which you are looking. When the gods created man, they allotted to him death, but life they retained in their own keeping. As for you, Gilgamesh, let your belly be full of good things. Day and night, night and day, dance and be merry, feast and rejoice. Let your clothes be fresh, bathe yourself in water, cherish the little child that holds your hand, and make your wife happy in your embrace. For this too is the lot of man. It was the secret of life offered freely, the wisdom of acceptance, the call to find joy not in permanence, but in the fleeting, beautiful moments of a mortal life. But Gilgamesh was deaf to it. His grief was a storm that drowned out her gentle voice. His fear was a wall that her wisdom could not penetrate. No, alewife, he insisted. I will not accept this. Tell me, how do I find Utnapishtim? Which is the way? Seeing that his heart was closed, Siduri sighed and gave him the directions he craved. To reach Utnapishtim, you must cross the sea. But these are not mortal waters, Gilgamesh. They are the waters of death, and their touch is fatal to any who are not divine. Find the ferryman Urshanabi. He serves Utnapishtim. If it is possible, he will take you across. If not, then you must turn back. Gilgamesh rushed to the shore and found Urshanabi with his boat. But with the ferryman were mysterious beings, the stone ones, sacred objects or creatures that were essential for the crossing. In a blind fit of his grief-stricken rage, believing them to be hostile, Gilgamesh took up his axe and senselessly shattered them to pieces. Urshanabi was horrified. Your own hands have prevented your crossing, the ferryman cried. You have destroyed the very things that would have protected us. The quest seemed over, ruined by the king's own uncontrollable anguish. But there was one last desperate chance. Go into the forest, Urshanabi commanded. Cut 120 poles, each 60 cubits long. You will use each pole only once to push the boat, and then you must cast it away, so that your hands never touch the waters of death. With immense labor born of his desperation, Gilgamesh did as he was told. The king who had once forced his own people into ceaseless labor now toiled alone, his hands bleeding, his body aching. His quest for an easy answer had become a journey of immense suffering, propelled only by the sheer, unyielding force of his will to outrun the grave. The voyage across the waters of death was a grim and silent ordeal. Pole by pole, Gilgamesh propelled the boat forward, his own immense strength pitted against the final sea at the edge of the world. Each pole, used once and then discarded, was a measure of his dwindling hope, a testament to the desperate lengths he would go to find his answer. Finally, the last pole was cast aside. The boat drifted inert upon the lethal waters. Using his own body as a mast and his tattered animal skins as a sail, Gilgamesh completed the final leg of the journey, collapsing onto a distant shore, utterly spent. There, on the shore of that forgotten land, he saw him, the man he had sacrificed everything to find. His ancestor, Utnapishtim the faraway. But the sight was an anticlimax. There was no divine aura, no radiant power. He was simply a man, resting in the sun, seemingly no different from any other elder. Gilgamesh, haggard and broken, approached him, his voice filled with a weary confusion. I have looked upon you, Utnapishtim, Gilgamesh began, and your appearance is no different from my own. You are not a monster or a god of war. Yet you lie here at your ease, while I have wandered the earth, my heart filled with sorrow. Tell me, how did you, a mortal man, come to join the assembly of the gods? How did you find eternal life? Utnapishtim looked at the weary king who was his descendant. He saw the fire in his eyes, the grief that had driven him across the world, and he decided to tell him the secret he held. It was not a formula or a magic spell. It was a story, the story of how the world had ended, and how he had survived. I will reveal to you a hidden thing, Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim began, his voice carrying the weight of ages. A secret of the gods. There was a time when I was king of the ancient city of Shuruppak, a beautiful city that stood on the banks of the Euphrates. The city was old, and humanity had multiplied across the face of the earth. But the clamor of mankind grew too loud. Our noise, our ceaseless activity, ascended to the heavens and disturbed the sleep of the great god Enlil, the lord of earth and wind. And his anger grew so great that he convinced the other gods in their secret council to do the unthinkable, to wipe out all of humanity with a great flood. The gods swore an oath of secrecy. But one of them, the clever god Ea, the lord of wisdom and sweet waters, would not stand by and watch his creation be annihilated. Bound by his oath, he could not speak directly to me. So he came to my reed house and whispered his secret to the wall, knowing I was on the other side. Reed hut, wall, wall, he whispered. Man of Shuruppak, son of Ubertutu, tear down your house and build a boat. Abandon your possessions and seek life. Forsake your worldly goods and save your soul. And take with you on board the boat the seed of all living things. I gave Utnapishtim precise, divine instructions. The boat was to be a perfect cube, a colossal ark with an acre of floor space, divided into 6 decks and 9 compartments. To prevent panic and suspicion among his people, I gave him a cunning lie to tell them. Tell them, I instructed, that the god Enlil is angry with you, and you must flee to the gulf to live with your lord. But say that your departure will cause Enlil to rain down upon them a shower of riches, of birds and fish and a bountiful harvest. For 7 days the whole city worked to build the great boat. The carpenters, the reed workers, the elders, they all labored, feasting and drinking as if for a great festival, oblivious to the impending doom. I loaded the boat with everything I had. I loaded it with all my silver, all my gold. I loaded it with my family and my kin. I loaded it with the craftsmen of my city, and with the beasts of the field, both wild and tame, the seed of all living things. Then on the appointed day the storm came. A black cloud rose from the horizon, and the god of the storm, Adad, thundered within it. The heralds of the storm, the gods Shelit and Hanish, flew over mountain and land. A terrifying darkness fell over the world, turning day into night. The land was shattered like a pot. For 6 days and 7 nights, the wind and the floodwaters raged with the fury of a war. All of humanity was turned back into clay. Even the gods were terrified by the violence of their own creation. They fled to the highest heaven of Anu, cowering like beaten dogs. The goddess Ishtar cried out like a woman in childbirth, weeping for her children, the human race now destroyed. On the 7th day the storm subsided. I opened a hatch and light fell on my face. I looked out and all was quiet. The sea was as flat as a rooftop, and all of mankind was gone. I fell to my knees and wept. The boat had come to rest on the peak of Mount Nizur. For 7 more days I waited. Then I released a dove. It flew off, but finding no place to land, it returned. I released a swallow. It too returned. Finally I released a raven. It saw that the waters had receded. It found food, it ate, it circled, and it did not return. I knew then that it was over. I opened the boat and released all that was within it. On the peak of the mountain I prepared a sacrifice. The gods, starved for the offerings of humanity, smelled the sweet savor and gathered around the smoke like flies. But when Enlil arrived, he was enraged to see that some had survived. It was Ea who placated him, arguing that his punishment had been too extreme. Punish the sinner for his sin, Ea argued, but do not destroy all for the transgression of one. Enlil's anger abated. He came aboard the boat, took my hand and my wife's and made us kneel. He touched our foreheads and stood between us to bless us. Hitherto Utnapishtim has been but human, Enlil declared to the assembly of the gods. Henceforth he and his wife shall be like us gods. They shall live in the distance, at the mouth of the rivers. And so, Utnapishtim concluded, his story finished. They took me and settled me here. far from the world of men, and gave me this life that you seek." He looked at Gilgamesh, his expression saying what his words did not need to: "My gift was unique. It was a singular reward for a singular event. It cannot be repeated." Gilgamesh listened as the last words of the incredible tale faded into the silence of the distant shore. But the story brought him no comfort, only a cold and bottomless despair. Utnapishtim's immortality was not a secret to be learned or a prize to be won. It was a unique circumstance, a singular prize from a celestial lottery that would never be held again. He had journeyed to the end of the world only to learn that the door was, and had always been, locked. He looked at his ancient ancestor, a chasm of futility opening within him. "Your story is a marvel," Gilgamesh said, his voice hollow. "But what of me? What great assembly of the gods will convene for my sake, that I might find the life I so desperately seek?" Utnapishtim looked at the broken king, his gaze a mixture of pity and stern challenge. He saw a man who wanted to defy the fundamental order of the cosmos, and so he offered him a test, a simple yet profound challenge to prove his worthiness. "If you believe you are worthy of eternal life," Utnapishtim said, his voice even, "then first let us see you conquer its twin. Conquer sleep. Prevail against sleep for 6 days and 7 nights." This was the first battle in his new war against mortality, a war not of muscle and steel, but of pure will against the body's most basic need. To conquer death, he must first conquer the small death of sleep. Gilgamesh, the man of action, the slayer of monsters, accepted the challenge. He sat down upon the shore, his back straight, his eyes fixed on the horizon, determined to begin his vigil. But his quest had been long, his journey brutal. His body was spent, his spirit worn thin by grief. And as soon as he sat down to defy sleep, the mists of sleep itself, like a thick fog rolling in from the sea, breathed over him. He who had run for 12 leagues in absolute darkness, he who had battled lions and gods, was instantly and utterly overcome by simple human exhaustion. He slept. Utnapishtim watched him and turned to his wife with a sigh. "Look at this strong man who desires eternal life," he said. "Sleep like a fog blows over him." His wife, full of compassion, replied, "Touch him that he may awake. Let him return safe on the road by which he came." But Utnapishtim had a lesson to impart. "Mankind is deceptive," he said. "He will try to deceive you. Come, bake for him a loaf of bread for each day that he sleeps. Place them by his head and make a mark on the wall for every day that passes." And so she did. As Gilgamesh slept, she baked. The first day's loaf was set beside him. On the second day another. The third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, a seventh. When Gilgamesh finally stirred and awoke on the 7th day, he was groggy, confused, but ready to proclaim his victory. "I had barely begun to nod off when you touched me and woke me," he said to Utnapishtim. But Utnapishtim simply pointed. "Gilgamesh," he said, "count your loaves." Gilgamesh looked down and saw the undeniable, decaying proof of his failure. The first loaf was hard and dry. The second was brittle. The third was soggy and covered in a film of mold. The fourth was white with mildew. The fifth spotted with gray. The sixth loaf was stale and brown. And the seventh, the one from the day before, was still fresh on the coals. The marks on the wall confirmed it. He had not lasted an hour. He had slept for a week. He was devastated. The truth was absolute, undeniable. He could not even conquer sleep. How could he ever hope to conquer death? "What shall I do, Utnapishtim? Where shall I go?" he cried, his voice breaking in utter despair. "The robber has seized my limbs. Death is dwelling in my chamber, and wherever I set my foot, there too is death." His quest was a failure. Seeing his complete despair, Utnapishtim accepted the verdict. He instructed the now banished ferryman, Shinabi, to take Gilgamesh to a washing place. There Gilgamesh washed his long matted hair, cast away the filthy animal skins that were a monument to his grief, and bathed in the sea until his body was clean once more. He was given fresh, noble robes to wear, clothes befitting a king returning to his city. He was being prepared for his return to the world of the living, and the acceptance of his mortal fate. As he was about to board the boat, his journey a complete loss, Utnapishtim's wife spoke to her husband. Gilgamesh came here weary, he has labored hard. Will you not give him something to take back with him for his journey? Moved by his wife's compassion, Utnapishtim relented and called Gilgamesh back. Gilgamesh, he said, I will tell you a secret of the gods, a hidden thing. There is a plant that grows deep at the bottom of the ocean. It is like a thorny bramble, and its thorns will prick your hands like a rose. But if you can obtain this plant, it holds a marvelous power. It will not grant you eternal life, but it will restore a man to the youth of his prime. A new hope, fierce and desperate, flared in Gilgamesh's heart. It was not immortality, but it was the next best thing. A second chance. A reset. He could return to Uruk and be young and strong once more. He tied heavy stones to his feet, opened a channel to the deep, and let the ocean pull him down into its crushing depths. He found the plant, just as Utnapishtim had described. Though its thorns tore at his hands, he grasped it firmly, cut himself free from the stones and surfaced, gasping, with the prize clutched in his hand. The plant of how the old man becomes a young man. He showed it to Urshanabi, his spirit soaring. With this, he declared, I will return to my city Uruk. I will give it to an old man to eat to test its power. Then I myself shall eat it, and I will be returned to the youthful strength of my glory days. They began their long journey home. After many leagues, weary from travel, Gilgamesh saw a pool of water that was cool and inviting. Eager to wash the salt and grime from his body, he went to bathe. In a fatal moment of carelessness, a moment he would regret for eternity, he left the precious thorny plant on the bank. As he bathed, a serpent, drawn by the plant's sweet fragrance, slithered silently from the cool water. It found the plant, seized it, and ate it. And as it did, a miracle occurred. The serpent immediately shed its old, scaly skin, leaving it behind on the ground like a discarded garment, and slithered away, reborn and renewed. Gilgamesh finished his bath and came ashore to find his prize gone. In its place lay only the dry, empty skin of the snake. He collapsed to the ground. The hope, the struggle, the pain in his hands, it was all for nothing. He sat down and wept, the tears streaming down his face. He had endured everything, journeyed to the end of the world, touched the bottom of the sea, and found a miracle, only to have it stolen from him by a mindless beast at the very last moment. It was the final, crushing, definitive failure. For whom, Urshanabi, have my hands labored? He lamented, his voice choked with a sorrow beyond words. For whom has my heart's blood been spent? I have not brought a blessing for myself. I have only done a good thing for the serpent of the dust. The quest was over. He had fought death and he had lost. Utterly and completely. He was going home empty-handed. The journey home was not like the journey out. There were no terrifying dreams, no monstrous lions to battle, no desperate race against time. There was only a heavy, contemplative silence. The fire of his quest, the all-consuming terror of death that had propelled him to the ends of the earth, had been extinguished in the cool water of that fateful pool. He was returning to Uruk empty-handed, his quest for eternal life an absolute failure. He had looked into the abyss, and it had offered him no escape. He had fought death and death had won. As they drew near to their destination, the great city of Uruk rose on the horizon, its familiar silhouette shimmering in the Mesopotamian heat. And as Gilgamesh looked upon the home he had left in such a desperate flight, something within him shifted. He stopped the ferryman, his gaze fixed on the colossal structure that dominated the landscape. Shinabi, Gilgamesh said, his voice quiet, measured, and filled with a wisdom he had not possessed when he left. Go up, climb upon the walls of Uruk and walk about. Examine its foundation platform, scrutinize the brickwork. See how it is not made of mere clay, but of brick that has been baked in a kiln. Is it not a magnificent work? See the city itself. 1/3 is city, 1/3 is gardens, and 1/3 is the precinct of the temple of Ishtar. Behold the work of my hands. In that moment, looking upon the magnificent walls he had once built out of pure hubris and oppression, Gilgamesh had his final and most important revelation. He had journeyed across the world seeking a magical plant, a secret to make his life endure. But he now saw that the true flower of immortality had been waiting for him here, at home all along. It was not to be found in a mystical garden or at the bottom of the sea. It was here, in the baked brick and the sturdy foundations of the city he had built. His own life, his physical form, would fade. His body, like Enkidu's, would one day turn to clay. Death was the non-negotiable share allotted to mortals. But the works of one's hands, the community one builds, the legacy one leaves for others that could endure. These walls would outlast him. They would protect generations of his people long after his name was but a legend. His story, the tale of his great friendship, his profound grief, and his hard-won wisdom that could be passed down. A legacy far more potent than a rejuvenated body. He understood now the advice of Siduri the alewife. The meaning of life was not found in a futile rage against our mortality, but in the full-throated embrace of our humanity. It is found in what we create, what we build, what we protect, and what we share. Gilgamesh, the king who had begun his reign as a tyrant, had finally become a true shepherd of his people. He had lost the quest for eternal life, but he had won a profound understanding of what makes a mortal life meaningful. Gilgamesh returned to his throne, but he was not the same king who had left. The restless energy was replaced by a calm strength, the arrogance by a deep compassion. He ruled Uruk as a wise and just king for the remainder of his days, his reign remembered as a golden age. And so that the lessons of his immense journey would not be lost to the winds of time, he did one final thing. He commanded that his entire story, the tale of his friendship with Enkidu, his battles with demons, his journey to the edge of the world, and his ultimate, necessary failure be engraved onto stone tablets and placed within the foundations of the very walls he so admired. He who had seen the deep, who had learned the secret of the lands, who had traveled a long and weary road, returned, and engraved on stone the whole story. The Epic of Gilgamesh is therefore more than just the world's oldest surviving work of great literature. It is a foundational text of human consciousness. It is a 4,000-year-old message in a bottle, telling us that our most profound anxieties, our fear of death, our desperate search for meaning, our deep need for friendship, and our capacity for both terrible hubris and boundless wisdom, have been with us from the very dawn of civilization. Gilgamesh, the mighty king, fought the inevitable and he lost. But in his failure, he found what it truly means to be human. He learned that we cannot escape our mortal fate, but we can build a life and leave behind a story that is worthy of being remembered. And that, perhaps, is the only kind of immortality that truly matters. Thank you for joining us on this journey back to the dawn of storytelling here at the Eldritch Codex. If you found this exploration of Gilgamesh's epic quest for life enlightening, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the foundational myths and forgotten lore of our world. Ring the bell icon to ensure you never miss an expedition into the past. We believe that in these ancient stories, we can find the blueprints of our own modern lives. Until next time, stay curious,